And if you're anything like me, growing up, you never had a conversation about what it means to be a man. What is it that takes someone from a boy to a man? Because it's not just simply your age. Welcome back to the Made to Be Men podcast, where we encourage men to walk with God and be who God has called them to be. My name's Chris, I'm your host, and today I have a very special, important, and I would say foundational topic to discuss, because I want to talk about manhood. Manhood is the topic for today. And so this is foundational, obviously, to the podcast, being a men's podcast, and to every man, especially young Christian men. I want every man to know what it means to be a man and what manhood means. And if you're anything like me, growing up, you never had a conversation about what it means to be a man. No one ever told you what a man really is. No one spelled it out for you or gave you a blueprint or explained to you what manhood is. And so today, I'm going to start what will be a series, I think, on what manhood is. It's going to be the things that I wish I had been told when I was young. What a man is and how you become a man, really. Our idea of what a man is for each of us has been formed by what we've seen growing up, generally. And for myself, even though I never had a conversation and no one told me what a man was until I got into my 20s, but I had an idea of what a man should be based on what I had seen. And some of it was good, some of it was bad. I saw some men working hard to provide for their family. Now, that aspect you could say is good. So one aspect I saw of manhood was providing. But then I also saw some men trying to dominate or assert themselves. And it's like, okay, is that what men are supposed to be like? Are they supposed to be dominant, tough, forceful? Because I never had the direct conversation, I picked these things up without really having a clear idea of which view of manhood is correct. And so today we're really going to look at what it means to be a man. And the first point I want to make is that males are born, but men are built. That's the first point. You're born a male, but you have to become a man. Men are built over time, through actions, through steps. There are stages to manhood. What is it that takes someone from a boy to a man? Because it's not just simply your age. There are adults who have not become men. They're still boys, even though they're of an adult age. So it's not purely your age that makes you become a man. So if it's not your age that causes you to become a man, how do you become a man? And what is a man? Well, I want to start with 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 11. He writes, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways." Now, this is a verse, I've heard it spoken before several times, and I've read it several times before. And it seems quite obvious, Of course, when you were a child, you spoke like a child, you thought like a child, you were a child. And then, of course, it makes sense if you've become a man, if you're no longer a child, you no longer act like a child, right? And so it seems quite a simple, obvious verse. But here's the thing. It tells us what a man is. It tells us how you become a man. And this is my second point. To become a man means to put away childish things. So if putting away childish things is what makes us, is what brings us to manhood, we need to understand, okay, what are childish things? Because if we know what childish things are, the opposite of that is manhood. because by putting those things away, we enter manhood. So what are childish things? Well, the first thing we can know about children is children are immature. There's no maturity. A child is selfish. They think about themselves and what they can get. That's why children have to be taught to think of others. They have to be taught to share because they themselves are selfish. A child is irresponsible. A child is not faithful. They're unreliable. You can't rely on a child for anything because they haven't reached a level of maturity where they can be responsible for certain things and relied upon. So if immaturity and irresponsibility are childish ways, the opposite of that is maturity and responsibility. In fact, the sign of maturity is responsibility. So the essence of manhood is responsibility. So the third point, and this is the key point, is that the essence of manhood is responsibility. The first and most important way in which we put away childish things or childish ways is in our thinking. We have to learn to think maturely, to think responsibly. That's what manhood, that's the first point, the starting point to manhood, is to think responsibly, think maturely. There's another verse here in 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 20. And it says, brothers, do not be children in your thinking. Be infants in evil, but in your thinking, be mature. So being mature in our thinking is a key to growing up and becoming a man. That's how we become men. We start thinking like men. So based on all of this, this would be my definition of a man. A man is a male who fulfills the responsibility to which God has called him to. That's a man. Being who God has called you to be, being responsible in the way God has called you to, that's a man. Now, we have to break that down and what that looks like exactly, but the foundation is that responsibility. Now, there's different aspects of responsibility, but we can categorize them into three main categories, three main stages of responsibility. And you could also see these as stages of manhood. So the first is responsibility for ourselves. Responsibility for yourself. That's the first stage to manhood. The second stage is responsibility for your family or those close to you. You're responsible not just for yourself at that point, you're responsible for those you love, those who are in your immediate, in your own home and in your circle. And then the third stage is responsibility for those beyond that, those outside your home, those outside of those who are close to you. That's the third stage. We can also see all three stages in the life of Jesus. Jesus, who is the ultimate man, who is the model man. If we look at his life, we can see the three stages of responsibility. So Jesus was responsible for himself, firstly. We can see that when he was 12 years old, he was going to the synagogue. And there's this story in the book of Luke where, his parents had lost him and didn't know where he was, and they searched for him for days, and he was found in the synagogue talking, with the rabbis and discussing with them. And his mother Mary said to him, where were you? We were looking for you. We were distressed. And he said, did you not know that I must be in my Father's house? And this shows us Jesus had an understanding of God as his Father, firstly, but he was taking responsibility for his spiritual life. He was taking responsibility for his purpose. He understood that he needed to be in the house of God and that he needed to know his Father and know his purpose on earth. So even at 12 years old, Jesus had a sense of responsibility. That's the first stage of manhood, responsibility for himself. And then we can see the second stage of responsibility. When Jesus began his ministry, he called 12 disciples to follow him. He looked after and provided for 12 disciples every day for 3 years. His disciples, who were like his family, they were close to him, and he took responsibility for them. He was responsible to make sure they were good. That's the second stage of responsibility. And then we can see the third stage, where he went to the cross and ultimately took responsibility for the whole world by taking their sin on himself and sacrificing himself for them. He took responsibility for the world. So we see the 3 stages of manhood: responsibility for yourself, responsibility for your family and those close to you, and responsibility for the wider world. And there's a reason, we have some respect for men who take care of themselves, who are responsible. And then we have even greater respect for men who take care of their family, men who are responsible for a family. But then the people we really look up to, the great men, the heroes, are the ones who do the first 2. They're responsible for themselves, responsible for their families, and then they have a level of sacrifice that they've undertaken and responsibility beyond that, in service of their calling, which is always going to be to help and serve people. That's the third stage of manhood. And we also see this sense of responsibility when we read about Adam in Genesis. When God first made man, Genesis 2:15, it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it." So God gave Adam, the first man, responsibility straight away. He was responsible for the garden, to work it and to keep it. And being responsible for your garden, this is a picture of the purpose of man, even till today. We're responsible for our gardens. We're responsible for the things within our influence, within our house, within ourselves, within those close to us. Being responsible for your garden is the purpose of man. And that means both protecting what's within your garden and working it, cultivating it to make it even better. Every man should make the things he comes into contact with better. He should make it produce more. Everyone we meet should leave us better than they met us. If they're within our garden, we should help them. We should cultivate them to make them grow. This is responsibility. So to become a man, become mature, and take care of what's within our garden, we go through the stage of responsibility for ourselves, responsibility for our family, and then responsibility for those beyond that. So I hope that was helpful. This is just the first video to lay the foundation for what manhood is. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.